point is debated constantly probably doesn't get the kind of press that it needs to have, because clearly from the point of view of the public, this is about your faith. And the way creationists put this forward is by accepting evolution, you are of necessity rejecting God, you're of necessity an atheist. That's one of the talking points that they have. And what's lost from this debate are the large middle positions that are compatibilist. And so Haught's role in the trial was to talk about the theological position. So that's what he'll do for us here. Evolution and faith, what's at stake?
Thank you very much, Rob. Maybe somebody can turn the lights down. Thanks. Very happy to be here this morning. And I want to thank all those who organized this event, especially Rob Panic for the enormous amount of work that went into this. And he's been working on it for a long time. He certainly deserves our gratitude. And it's also a great opportunity for me to meet other members of the witnesses, especially Brian, whom I had not met before, very moved by his testimony. And thank all of you for being here. Well, a lot of people have their own agenda in this whole discussion of intelligent design. And what I wanted to do was to talk about why I agreed to testify at this trial. I think it's a very important issue, but perhaps for reasons, as Brian did just now, that not everybody thinks about. For most of you here, probably it's an issue in which what is at stake is quality science education, and as Brian said, reason and logic. And there, for many people, it's something that has to do with sectarian, cultural, and ethical ideals. But as someone who for many years has been involved in discussion of the relationship between science and religion, for me, as I look at it, at least at some level, maybe not to the same degree of intensity for everyone, but at some level, I think for most people who are interested in this topic, what is at issue is the biggest question of all. And that's the question that I think underlies almost all issues in science and religion. And that's the question of whether this universe that we live in can be said to have a purpose. That is, anything of significance working itself out in this wonderful banquet that we call the cosmos. And for a lot of people, of course, the question is not that interesting, but of course, for many people it is. Is there a purpose in the universe? It's obviously a question that's too big for any of us. But the reason that some people find it interesting is that, to quote W.T. States, if the whole scheme of things is pointless, that is, the whole shebang, the whole universe is pointless, then because of the intricate way in which each one of us is tied into the universe, so also, he says, would be our individual lives. Now, not everybody agrees with that, of course, but States goes on to say that religions stand or fall on the question of purpose. If the universe is pointless, if the universe is not here for a reason, if there's no principle of goodness that somehow underlies this thing we call the cosmos of the universe, then what point is there to religion? Religions would be implausible. Václav Havel, the former president of the Czech Republic, found this to be an interesting question because he said the crisis of the much-needed global responsibility, including ecological responsibility, is due to the fact that we've lost, especially in the intellectual world, the sense that the universe has a purpose. What we have to ask today, doesn't science, and especially evolution, rule out cosmic purpose, and therefore undermine the very foundations, the intellectual foundations of a plausible religious perspective? Certainly some scientists, prominent scientists, think that science has done so. Steven Weinberg, for example, is famous for saying that the more scientifically comprehensible the universe has become, the more pointless it also seems. And he thinks there's sufficient evidence in physics itself to make this point, but that the decisive evidence that the universe cannot be purposeful, says Weinberg, is evolution, Darwinian evolution. Another 20th century physicist, Richard Feynman, says the great accumulation of understanding as to how the physical world behaves only convinces one that this behavior has a kind of meaninglessness about it. And Margaret Geller, astronomer at Harvard, commenting on Stephen Weinberg's statement, says, "What point? It's just a physical system." Stephen Jay Gould essentially agrees with these other scientists. He says, after Darwin, especially because of Darwin, we finally become free to detach our search for ethical truth and spiritual meaning, our quest for purpose, in other words, from our scientific quest to understand the facts and mechanisms of nature. Darwin, he says, made it necessary for each one of us to be the creators of whatever purpose there is, since obviously there is no inherent purpose in the universe. Darwinism expelled that once and for all. And of course, another scientist, Woody Allen, if I could paraphrase him, says there is purpose in the universe, except for certain parts of the universe. Traditional religions, all of which came about long before we had any sense of evolution, had very little difficulty thinking of the universe as purposeful. They thought of it as a hierarchically arranged ladder of levels, moving from matter, lowly matter at the bottom, through plants, animals, humans, and then ultimately contextualized by an outer circle of ultimate meaning. Now, this scheme operates according to what I would call the hierarchical principle, and that maintains that a higher level in this hierarchy can encompass or get itself around the lower, but a lower cannot encompass or get itself around the higher, it cannot comprehend the higher. And what that would mean in the traditional way of looking at things is that understanding a lower level, say the level of matter in a physical and chemical way, would not qualify you to understand what's going on at the higher levels of reality. For that, just being smart and educated is not enough. For most of the great traditions, religious and philosophical in the past, one has to undergo a personal transformation in order to be adequate. The medieval philosophers referred to this as adequatio, we call it competency. Competency to understand the higher levels, especially the highest level of all, does not come cheaply, nor should it. One has to be prepared by discipline, by a set of exercises, by a spirituality, in order to become adequate to the higher levels. And that's because the more important something is in the traditional view of things, the more real it is, the more elusive it would be from the perspective of human consciousness, which occupies a relatively low status in the total scheme of things. So if there is an ultimate meaning or an ultimate purpose to things, the traditional philosophies and religions said, it would lie beyond human comprehension. We could be comprehended by it, but we could not hope to comprehend it. And that doesn't mean that you need to be completely unaware of it. You can have an awareness of being grasped by something of ultimate importance or ultimate significance. But that's not a controlling kind of cognition. And the only way you can talk about it is through symbol or analogy or metaphor. And that's the language of traditional religions. Well, let's move abruptly to the new contemporary evolutionary picture of the cosmos. It's a universe that's said to be 13.7 billion years old. The way I like to picture this with my students was to have them imagine on their bookshelf 30 big books, each book 450 pages long, each page representing 1 million years in the story. The Big Bang will take place on page 1. But you'll notice that the first two shelves and part of the third consist of essentially lifeless and mindless material stuff. The Earth story begins 4.5 billion years ago in volume 21. A little over 1 billion years later, the first sparks of life begin to flame up on our planet, and evolution takes over. But even so, life doesn't become terribly complicated until you get toward the end of volume 29, 500 to 600 million years ago, with the the Cambrian explosion, dinosaurs, which come in around the middle of volume 30, go extinct on page 385, opening up only the last 65 pages of the book for eventual development of mammals, hominids, and ourselves. And humans, with their intelligence and ethical capacities, we come in only in the very bottom of the very last page of the very last book. Now, if you're a thoughtful person today, you can't help asking, what's the point of all this? What's going on? Is there any purpose to it? You might have heard Bertrand Russell's answer to that question. He says, if the point of this story is to produce intelligence, then why did it take so long to produce so little? But what has really complicated this whole picture for many, and this is something the intelligent design people and the creationists are complaining about, is the impersonality of the evolutionary recipe, biological evolutionary recipe, which, if you want to simplify it, consists of three basic ingredients. You have to have a lot of accidents. Accidents in the origin of life itself, perhaps. Accidents in the variations which provide the raw material for evolutionary change. And accidents in natural history, such as the meteorite that hit the Yucatan Peninsula perhaps 65 million years ago, wiping out the dinosaurs and eventually making the existence of mammals, primates, us, possible. And you mix that high degree of accidentality, or contingency, philosophers call it, you mix that up with the impersonality of natural selection, and you stir it up in the bowl of deep cosmic time. It makes a lot of people who read about evolution wonder, how could a universe that sponsors such a puzzling process ever be called purposeful? But not only that, what's really going on here in evolution, at least for many people who think about it, and even creationists and intelligent design people think about it, at least to some degree. What's going on, it seems to many of them, is that the hierarchy, which I showed in the first slide, which is the framework within which traditional ethics and religious sensibilities were sculpted, and which we still follow today in our common sense world. Every legal system in the world is still based upon this hierarchical view of things. It seems to get flattened out. A kind of nihilism seems to be implicit in evolution for many people who look at it, at least at first sight. Matter, which was the lowest level in the traditional hierarchy, now becomes the dominant feature in this new picture of an evolving universe, or a processive universe, and which eventually brings about the evolution of life. Life comes in as a kind of afterthought. Mind shows up only on the last page. And meaning, which was the highest level of all in the traditional view of things, in the thinking of many moderns and postmoderns, and Gould is an example of this, meaning is little more than the projection by our own minds and hearts onto what seems to be a cold and indifferent universe, a kind of tie-up of warmth and meaning, but that it inherently is not meaningful, inherently it's not purposeful. And take any example from biology. Darwin's what destroyed design for Darwin were such displays as the Ichneumon wasp. But you can take something like the life cycle of the sheep liver food, which is not talked about nearly enough. There's a parasite that lives near our ponds, and it gets inside of a water snail and starts eating the creature away from the inside. It reproduces asexually. The youngsters swim to the edge of the pond. They crawl up blades of grass and form little cyst-like formations there. Then the definitive host, a sheep or a cow, will come along and eat the grass, and the cyst will dissolve. The worms will crawl into the liver, and in doing so cause enormous discomfort. They reach sexual maturity in the bile ducts. They pass the eggs on through the feces, and this implacable cycle recontinues age after age after age. Again, if you're a thoughtful person, you cannot help asking what's going on here. What kind of universe is it that would allow for something like this to take place? Sir Charles Sherrington, as you can see from his picture, is not very happy about this situation. example. It's a story of securing existence to a worm at cost of life superior to it in the scale of life as humanly reckoned. Life's prize is given to the aggressive and inferior of life, destructive of other lives at the expense of suffering in them, and sad as it may seem to us, suffering in proportion as they are lives high in life's scale. There's nothing fair about this. And he says this is only one of many examples that you can think of from biology. Richard Dawkins, you heard his ideas on this. What's going on here? What's going on in life? Among other things, DNA has been passed on. And so long as DNA is passed on, it doesn't matter who or what gets hurt in the process. For Dawkins, it often seems that this at bottom is what evolution is all about. And genes don't care about something because they don't care about anything. I mentioned Dawkins because so many of the people in intelligent design have read him, and have read it very carefully. And he draws this philosophical conclusion. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. In his book, Climbing Mount Improbable, Dawkins asked the reader to imagine a mountain on one side of which there's a sheer vertical drop-off to the plain below, and on the other side a more gentle slope, say at a 45-degree angle. And he says that if life had only a matter of a biblical period of 6,000 to 10,000 years to move from primitive cell to something as complex as the eye and brain, then intelligent design, he says, would make good sense. In fact, he thinks Paley was quite a genius and that the best we could do before Darwin. But after Darwin, and especially after cosmology has lengthened the span of the Earth's and the universe's existence, we go around to the other side of the mountain, the slope side, and imagine a trail of life meandering back and forth slowly, gradually, making very, very minute steps for a period of roughly 4 billion years. You mix that up with the other two ingredients of the evolutionary recipe, randomness or accidents or chance, plus the remorseless rule of selection, and that would make the emergence of complex organisms probable in a purely naturalistic way. Given enough time, that which is improbable becomes increasingly probable, and therefore there's no excuse any longer to appeal to the notion of intelligent design. And he adds to that, and this is an important point that people sometimes miss in Dawkins. Dawkins, like the intelligent design people, thinks that the whole issue of cosmic purpose is contingent upon, depends totally upon the existence of intelligent design. So if there's no intelligent design, therefore the universe becomes purposeless. This is a connection that he makes time and time again. Something I want to come back to in a moment. And of course, there's always the problem that people have of how to map the new scientific picture of human origins onto any classic theological or religious picture of human origins. I'm going into all this just to give a kind of background to how I see what's going on in the mind of people like Philip Johnson. And what he's trying to do, among other things. Yes, there are a lot of things going on. There's a lot of deception. There's a political agenda. There's a cultural agenda. There are all sorts of things going on. But at some level, even with somebody like Philip Johnson, I don't think we can dismiss the possibility that there's something very, very interesting going on. And that not only he, but many people today, I know that millions and millions of people who defend intelligent design, who are not experts in it, see it as really a problem that has to do with the most fundamental question of all, that of cosmic purpose. Now, the way his thought unfolds, the idea of a purposeless universe, he thinks, stems from a modern materialist metaphysics or ideology. And that Darwinism, as he calls it, again, it's a code word, it's a loaded term. Darwinism, at bottom, is not science, but a way for materialists, especially in the intellectual world, to spread their atheistic agenda. And not only that, is to say that the Darwinian recipe is scientifically inaccurate. If you make that case, then they can accomplish a lot. The idea of intelligent design is essential, he goes on to explain living complexity scientifically. And biology classes, therefore, should give balanced treatment to intelligent design as though it were a scientific idea and evolution. I think what he and others in the movement are doing is to say this, that finding intelligent design empirically and scientifically would be sufficient evidence that purpose is present in nature after all. I think that religious thing is going on, at least at some level of depth, and at some level of seriousness, even in the most cynical instance of intelligent design. So what's at stake? From the point of view of the whole discussion of science and religion, what's at stake here is whether there's room for any trust in cosmic purpose in an age of science and evolution. And this is how I got interested in the issue and agreed to testify at the trial, because I think this is a part of what's going on that we don't always focus on enough. In order to approach that question, what I argued at the trial, and my lawyers insisted that I drag out this old example, which I got very tired of, but I'll do it again. Is to make an argument for what I call layered explanation. By layered explanation, I mean to point to the fact that most of the things in our experience admit of a plurality of levels of understanding or explanation. And the simplest example I can think of was a pot of water boiling on the stove. Somebody comes up to you in your kitchen and says, "Why is the kettle boiling?" Explain it to me. And one very good explanation would be to say, because the H2O molecules are moving around excitedly, making a transition from the liquid state to the gaseous state, and that's why that pot is boiling. But you could also answer the question by saying it's boiling because I turned the burner on. And you could also answer the question by saying it's boiling because I want tea. This is layered explanation, layered understanding. And the point I'm trying to make, it's not a sophisticated philosophical argument, it's just a very simple point that we can carry an explanation at one level as far as possible without that necessarily having to contradict the other levels of what's going on. There's really no competition among these levels. In other words, you don't say the water's boiling because of molecular movement rather than because I want tea. Or you don't say it's boiling because I want tea rather than because of molecular movement. But as I was watching this case, the Dover case unfolded, listening to the radio, listening to TV, and so forth, how many times did I hear the media, a writer, or an author, a TV commentary saying, what's at issue in this case is whether life was created by natural selection or by God. That's what's at issue here. It's that false either-or kind of dichotomy that carried through in the public understanding of this whole case. The point of this very simple example is to just argue that in principle, at least in principle, there need not be any competition or conflict between a teleological explanation, that is, an explanation in terms of purpose, and, say, an argument of the sort that science used, that resorts to what Aristotle called efficient or material causation. There's not necessarily, certainly in Aristotle's mind, there's no conflict. And I found it interesting, as I look at the way the ancients approached this question of explanation, that they were much more comfortable with layered explanation than we are today. Socrates, for example, in his dialogue Phaedo, or Plato in his dialogue Phaedo, is having Socrates and the boys sitting around in prison where Socrates is waiting execution. And they're chewing the rag about why he's sitting there. And Socrates teases them and says, well, I'm sitting here because my body's composed of bones and sinews. The bones are rigid and separated at the joints, and that's why I can sit. That's why I'm sitting here. But he's obviously trying to get them to think in deeper levels of explanation. And he goes deeper in Plato does in the dialogue. He's sitting there because the Athenians had condemned him, and he had thought it right and honorable to accept their penalty. And that's why he's sitting there. But Plato goes even further and says there's an even deeper reason. The ultimate explanation for why he's sitting there is that he was grasped by the good, by the divine, grasped hold of his consciousness, and would not let go, and then persuaded and pulled Socrates to do what he thought was right. Layered explanation. And what I try to do with my students is get them to try to get a taste for and get in the habit of looking at things in terms of layers. Because I think this whole discussion, this whole controversy, so-called controversy, false controversy, has to do with our inability to think in terms of layers of understanding. And this, I think, is true not just of the creationists and intelligent design people, but I think it's also true of many people that I've read and talked with in the scientific community as well. Another example of layered explanation, a very interesting question today in science, is how and why did life come about on our planet or wherever it came about? How did those first little organisms or protocells come about? Well, even within science, you have layers of understanding. Physics will describe it in terms of thermodynamics, self-organizing properties of matter, and so forth. Chemistry will talk about the bonding properties of carbon and so forth. And biochemistry will talk about RNA cycles, protein formation, a lot of different theories going around and out. And each one of these is allowed to push its way of understanding as far as it possibly can, and it's not going to conflict with others. Today, Martin Rees, for example, Royal British Astronomer, says that science has to add another layer. We can't hope to have any understanding of the origin of life unless we go all the way back to the beginning of the universe and see how its values were structured at the very beginning, so that down the road it would be able to be a life-bearing universe. So astrophysics has to be part of the explanation, layer upon layer of understanding. A friend of mine, Harold Morowitz, he teaches at George Mason University, would say we can't really hope to understand life until we first get a handle on what scientists are calling emergence, because the emergence of life is one of 28 or so major emergence steps that the universe has taken so far. Now, what I would say as a theologian, and this is in no way an attempt to prove anything, but it's an attempt to make in principle sort of a point that should prevent conflict, unnecessary conflict between science and religion. That you could add a fourth layer to this without in any way competing with the others. You could say life comes about because of the creative, propulsive influence of an infinite generosity. It does not, in principle, have to contradict or compete with any of the others. There's no reason why theology or religion should ever be thought of as conflicting with science. So, in terms of thinking about this large question of purpose, what I would propose is an analogy. Theology, you have to use analogies. If you use something less than analogy, then you're not doing theology, you're doing science or whatever. Divine purpose, if there is such a thing, would relate to the origin and evolution of life, analogously to the way in which I1T stands in relation to the molecular movement in the kettle. I made this argument at the trial when the economists picked this up, and the headline was "A Tempest in the Teapot" or something. I regretted using it again. Or analogously to the way in which the attractive power of the good stands in relation to Socrates' posture of sitting there in prison. There's a decoupling here of causal explanations. And it's ridiculous to try to map one onto the other, or to compare one with the other, or to place one in competition with the other. So that even the most meticulous examination of the molecular movement in the kettle is not going to reveal at that level of understanding the I1T that hovers in your kitchen over the whole situation, causally speaking. But yet, in our conversations about intelligent design and Science and religion in general were often confused at different levels. So even the most thorough examination of Socrates' bones and sinews is not going to reveal the power of the good, but explains ultimately for Plato why he's sitting there in his cell. And the lesson that I draw from that is even the most detailed scientific examination of nature should not reveal or could not reveal the presence of purpose in nature if there isn't. This is a principle that's violated time and time again by the intelligent design people, as I'll show in a moment. So by itself, science is simply not wired to pick up these signals of purpose. And therefore, when scientists like Dawkins and others comment on the ultimate implications of their science, they're slipping out of science, they're slipping away from what I call methodological naturalism, and they're entering into philosophical beliefs. And this is something that not only intelligent design people should avoid, but scientists in general I think should avoid. So to come to the question then, what about living complexity? What about design, or intelligent design? Why is there complex design in life at all? At the level of science, you would use such explanations as the physics of self-organizing principle properties, and you talk about other things, chemically and physically. Or at a biological level, you could say there's complex design in life because of natural selection. And push those as far as you possibly can. In principle, there's no disagreement between those two ways of explaining things. And say a theological explanation. There's complex design in the universe, ultimately because of the divine wisdom and love that endows nature with the resourcefulness to unfold in endless diversity of form. So it's not wrong to look for an underlying intelligence, I would prefer to use the term wisdom, as an ultimate explanation of living design. Where intelligent design goes wrong is in its looking for ultimate explanation, using the category of intelligence, which is really a category of ultimate explanation, not of scientific empirical explanation, and trying to wedge that in to the level of scientific explanation. The irony in all this is the intelligent design people are presupposing what a great deal of intellectual culture supposes, and that's that the only authoritative way to make a point is to make it scientific. It's ironic because it forgets, I think, a lot of the wisdom of our religious and philosophical traditions, which warn us against trying to squeeze explanations out of one single level, especially that of empirical inquiry. So my proposal would be, and this is what lies behind using the example of the trial, was to save the category of intelligence, and again I would refer to the term wisdom, for another layer than that of science. It's okay also, I would argue, to look for an evolutionary explanation of all living phenomena. Everything in life should be risked for the real of evolutionary explanation. And that includes intelligence or mind. We should try as far as possible, I believe, to give evolutionary explanations of intelligence. Also of ethics, and even of religion. Everything that's living should be made more interesting, can be made more interesting if we look at it in an evolutionary way. The only qualification I would make is that it's a leap of faith to identify evolutionary accounts with ultimate explanation. Let me conclude by just giving a sample of a religious thinker who tells us that when we use the term purpose, we should not think of design. And this religious thinker is Alfred North Whitehead, who is also one of the great mathematicians of the 20th century, one of the great philosophers of the 20th century, and he was also a theoretical physicist. In his years here when he taught at Harvard University, he often asked the question, what's really going on in this universe that we live in? And he concluded that at the very least, this universe cases with what we have now, has been in the business of intensifying beauty. Beauty is a hard term to define, but beauty is something that we self-evidently value. And what purpose would mean would be the orientation toward the realization of the value. So if the universe is in the business of actualizing beauty, we could call it, generally speaking, purposive. But we don't have to think of it as simply design. We should not conflate purpose with design, as Dawkins and intelligent design people do. Beauty is the synthesis of novelty and order, or of contrast and harmony, or of nuance and unity. It's a delicate synthesis, it's precarious, and the two elements that it synthesizes can easily get out of hand. For example, if you have too much novelty or too much diversity without enough unity and order, then that produces disorder. On the other hand, and this is very important in understanding how I look at intelligent design theologically, if you have too much order or too much design and not enough nuance, then that produces what Whitehead calls monotony and triviality. In fact, it doesn't hesitate to say there are two kinds of evil in our universe. There's the evil of disorder, for example, when something beautiful disintegrates. But there's also the evil of monotony and triviality, which is emphasizing harmony and design at the expense of nuance, at the expense of novelty, which would bring intensity to beauty. So he sees the universe that we live in as tending overall, not without setbacks, toward bringing about more and more intense beauty, that is, more and more intense versions of ordered novelty. And we can thank science for teaching us that the universe that we live in was always discontent with the status quo, was never content with any particular order or design. God, for Whitehead, is the principle not just of order, but also of novelty. So to identify the creator or ultimate reality with a designer is to fall into what he would call the evil of triviality. And so what he would argue for is that the religions of the world, to the extent that they think of God as love, should not think of God as forcing any sort of order onto the universe, but as persuading it to realize possibilities. We know from our own experience of interpersonal love that it's not love to force your will on the other person. So if we ever took seriously the religious intuition that there's a principle of love and goodness at the foundation of reality, we should never have expected this universe to have settled into some fixed design or to be tinkered with occasionally by this ultimate principle of goodness to force it to take a particular sort of order or design. This kind of understanding of God and the universe, therefore, allows for accidents, for freedom, for the evolutionary recipe that I talked about earlier. So I'm just pointing this out to give you a sample of how there are many, and this is just one sample, many ways in which, since Darwin, theological thought has thought about purpose, has understood the notion of ultimate reality without having to slip it into a squeeze or press it into the mold of a designer. So he would say, I think if he were here today, that the whole intelligent design approach is very bad theology because it leads toward identifying the ultimate principle of reality with the principle of monotony rather than the principle of beauty. For him, for Whitehead, the cosmic purpose means the maximizing of beauty. And he would say that each one of us, to the extent that we participate in this cosmic adventure, can think of our lives as meaningful. Thank you very much.
We have time for questions.
I could add something before I go on, because I don't know whether they're here or not. Joe Brandon and Mark Snell, curator of the American Museum of Natural History, issued an invitation to scientists to see if they could outdo the Discovery Institute in getting signatures to design in their case. And they got some actually interesting data, which I'd just like to pass on to you. Mark asked me if I could squeeze this in. They had almost 8,000 respondents. And they asked the question of faith among these scientists. And there were 54% who did not respond. But of the 64% of responders, the 64% of responders, 28% said that they were atheists, 8% agnostics. I'm sorry. Of those who did respond, 28% were atheists, 8% agnostics, and 64% said that they had some form of faith. And among that 64%, 92% were Judeo-Christian. Yes?
I'm going to kind of asking you to, stand in for people who think, for an intelligent design component, which probably isn't fair, but I'm trying to understand, take your liver fluke story, and I'm trying to understand the thinking behind being more satisfied with the creator bringing that about as opposed to a random process bringing that about, and whether, in fact, in reality, for most people, it's a deeper rejection of even asking those questions. Really, what they're not, it's not that they're dissatisfied with comparing the answers of one type of inquiry versus another. They're really offended at getting that information at all.
Yeah, well, in the first place, I think many would deny that the science that talks about the sheep liver fluke is accurate in the first place. I mean, there's something evolutionary about that, and evolution is something that they want to distance themselves from as far as possible. What they might say is this, that the evidence is all that we gather, that science evidence is only partial. There's some wider intelligent design that is in the mind of God that we don't have. And that we should be humble enough to admit that. But that at all costs, they want to preserve the idea that purpose requires a design. And that's, to me, that's pretty fatal for their whole discussion from a theological point of view, which is the point of view that I'm taking here. There are other problems that others have pointed out. I agree with everything that the other speakers have said so far today from their point of view. I just wanted to add that what is at stake for a lot of these people, maybe not so much the public presenters of intelligent design, but the average person who doesn't know much about science and who just spontaneously gravitates toward the intelligent design position, is it seems to them, and this is because of the poor religious education along with poor science education, it's a noxious mixture. It seems to them that they can't appropriate religiously and theologically any sort of understanding of nature in which the principle of goodness that underlies things is somehow compromised. And therefore, the science must be wrong, or at the very least, at the very best, it must be partial and limited in the way in which it elicits a sense of this underlying goodness. So there are all sorts of gymnastics are resorted to when they start the process of intellectually trying to justify a particular phenomenon like the sheep liver fluke and so forth. And my point is that we all just relax a little bit and allow each approach, scientific, religious, philosophical, theological, cultural, political, to have its own way, its own level, not trying to mix levels, not trying to have one level do what the other does. Then it will be a lot more benign situation.
I really thank you for this very beautiful and to me extremely useful talk. I wanted to ask you about the levels and the conflating of purpose with increasing authoritarianism, because I think the deep fear, if you articulate it on the science side, is that they will oppose their narrow sectarian form of religious value in a way that will stifle freedom and independent thought. And so the idea that there's a how do you best express when you're trying to teach this, that the idea that it can be a hierarchy, but the ultimate goal of making tea doesn't mean that everybody needs to drink tea instead of coffee, that's the, do you have any clear ideas or
Well, you don't want to look for the same sort of clarity at the level of I want tea as you do precision. It's perfectly appropriate for science to think of things in very precise and mathematically defined language as much as possible. And that's the nature of science, and that's very good. It leads us to focus on nature and see things about nature that we would not otherwise see. So science gives us a certain sort of truth. When you come to things like religious ideas, it's not so much, as the great theologian Paul Tillich says, it's not so much a matter of our grasping truth as our allowing ourselves to be grasped by it. And even when I talk about this when I talk about science, is to say, look at the way in which your whole life, perhaps you're an agnostic or even an atheist from the point of view of religious, look at the way in which your whole life has been grasped by the great value of truth. And you will not compromise this truth, no matter how much it hurts. That's a good example of what I mean being grasped by it. But when you come to talk about that truth, you can't talk about mathematically precise language. It's something, it's a whole different level of things that are going on here. And what I understand by religion is something quite analogous to, partially overlapping with the feeling, the sense that we all have of surrendering to something larger than yourselves, like scientific truth. I can't think of a better example of allowing some value to take hold. And it gives your life meaning, it gives you purpose, it gets you up in the morning. And that's what purpose is, the actualizing of what you take to be inevitably and ineradicably valuable. So it's a different sort of thing. So you don't want to fit one kind of discourse into the other. What's so annoying theologically about the intelligent design is it tries to fit what is really language which clumsily is referring to the absolute or the ultimate, trying to fit it onto the same plane as mundane or secular scientific understanding. And in the process, that amounts to a trivialization of theology, which is even worse than, theologically speaking, than messing up what science really is. So keep our levels straight. That's my agenda.
Good. I have one more question.
As you pointed out, I think many people are as naive that theology as science. And what I think your analysis is very appealing. It sounds to me like a version of what's often called theistic evolutionary. The idea that there is a God of creator who basically has set up the rules in this universe and none who have interfered, as you say, to be sure that it achieves some predestined order. But I think most people will not find that very appealing. Very appealing kind of God.
I don't want to propose
I think they want God who is actively involved.
Yeah, right.
And they in fact be actively involved in their own lives.
Exactly.
Prayers. And so I'm just wondering, while this can be, I think, very appealing to someone who's at the level of theology and science, is it going to sell very well?
Thank you, that's a very good question. I've written a number of books on theology and evolution, in which I try to respond to that question. But in general, I do want to avoid a deistic view of things. Deism was an 18th century version of theology, which had God setting up the universe in a certain way, according to certain laws, and then throwing it out there and then going on vacation, as it were. And in the 19th century, Methodism was a good example of a pietistic reaction to such a remote and irrelevant type of deity. So I think what you have, for example, in Whitehead, is an attempt to respond to your question, that the God I was talking about is a God of persuasion, which offers the universe new possibilities for being and continually opens up the future for the universe, but also feels in its last detail everything that goes on in the cosmos. Whitehead says God is the fellow sufferer. God suffers along and struggles along with life. And that many Christian theologians, such as myself, think we have to include in our understanding of a God who is relevant in any way to evolution. but that's how we